why didn't I get to the gym? Why didn't I make good food choices? Why didn't I move my body today? Why didn't I drink my water? Whatever it may be that you're working on. Let's keep playing that song until we get it right. And then we've got the whole thing that we can go from start to finish.
This is the Own It Show, where we tell stories of how everyday people made ownership theirs.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin, and cannot wait to dive into today's episode. And if you go back through the last probably 4 or 5 episodes that we've been talking about, everything has had a little bit of a common theme. And the common thread comes back to how those entrepreneurs have said that without their body being able to perform it the way that they had, they wouldn't have been able to reach the success in which they had. And so today we're bringing on somebody who not just only, I think, we haven't interviewed him yet, I think would also agree with those statements, but also has taken his entrepreneurial endeavors down that same path in being able to help empower other people to realize their peak potential through optimizing their bodies and really making it simple. And so, Mike, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. And I thank you for spending a little bit of time with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, Mike, I'd love for you to just kind of give our audience a little glimpse into the life of Mike Milner. And what does that look like in terms of creating this entrepreneurial journey? But why has health and wellness become such an important role that you've actually taken your entrepreneurial journey down that path?
Yeah, so I think the context that's important is kind of how it all happened and how it all started. I grew up an athlete. I played every sport. I was always fit and in shape, and just always thought that I was the lucky one with a fast metabolism because I was always doing something, and went off to college and picked up some typical college kid habits, which was eating a lot and drinking a lot. And then when organized sports ended for me, I was pretty sedentary. I gained a lot of weight very quickly and found myself basically unrecognizable in a very short period of time. Was over 250 pounds, and just I remember looking at myself in the mirror and being like, who is this person? And because my identity was so wrapped up in being an athlete, it was a lot of fear around, I can't go back and see friends anymore. I don't want to see family members. I know what they're going to say. They're going to ask all these questions. How did you let this happen? And that led me down the path of thinking that I needed to get the weight off to like find myself again. I needed to get my identity back. And it was like, I was afraid to step back on a basketball court or play tennis. And so I started doing what a lot of people do when they want to lose weight. I have a pretty extreme personality, so I cut calories as low as I could tolerate. I did hours of cardio every day, and I found myself on this chronic dieting wheel of losing a lot of weight very quickly and then gaining it back just as fast. And ultimately, it led me down a pretty dark place of body image issues, disordered eating tendencies, obsession with food and body image, and just not what you would consider healthy, even though there were times where I would lose, 80 plus pounds, and I would get all these compliments about my physical appearance. Internally, I was not healthy, and mentally, I was not healthy because I was miserable. I was tarnishing friendships, and I had relationships that were breaking, and all the things that I truly enjoyed in life was kind of put on the back burner. Anyway, it was through my process of crawling out of that hole that I was in that I really fell in love with doing things the right way, and really a health centric approach, meaning internal health and prioritizing, mental, emotional, physical health, and not trying to separate mind and body. And once I figured that out for myself, I was like, okay, I got to help people avoid all of these mistakes that I made. And it started out as me just being a personal trainer. I found my passion was more on the nutrition side. Started working as a nutrition coach for another company, did not align with what they were all about. And just, it was very dehumanized. It was very automated. It was very much a cookie cutter process. And I kind of had an ugly separation from that company, which was my sink or swim moment. And that led me to start my own company. I was able to do things the way that I thought was appropriate. And that was almost 5 years ago. So I've had my business and was fortunate enough to experience pretty rapid growth in my company over the past 4.5 to 5 years. And, now I have recognized through my own struggle that my business was only able to grow as much as I would allow it as an individual. So continuing to prioritize my health and well-being and my own personal development, it was like, if I was slacking on myself and not prioritizing myself, the business would suffer. If I wasn't growing, if I wasn't learning, if I wasn't trying to get better as a person, the business wasn't growing. And it became very apparent to me that those things go hand in hand. And it was almost a fearful, but also empowering thing to recognize that I can scale this as much as I'm willing to scale myself, if that makes sense.
100%. And I think that's what a lot of entrepreneurs start to learn is that when they first get into the game, and this is what we find with a lot of our clients and people that we start to really mentor in this space, is as soon as they get into this entrepreneurship game, when they're in their 20s, when they're in their 30s, maybe even into their 40s a little bit, they can play with an empty cup and push through it and kind of sometimes get away with it in spite of how negative their habits are, or in spite of how unhealthy, quote unquote, they are, even though they may not look it on the outside, but inside they're playing with this empty cup that will not last. And all of a sudden, when they get into this space of really needing their body to show up, they start to see chronic illness, they start to see disease, they start to see diabetes, they start to see type 3 diabetes, which otherwise is known as Alzheimer's and dementia, starting to come in, and this brain fog that's really hitting us in a different way right now with a lot of our entrepreneurs that we're seeing. But they start to see their bodies failing them. And that actually becomes, and you said it really well, becomes the linchpin in being able to continue to scale, continue to show up in their business. And it's not only in their business, but it becomes in their family, it becomes in their personal lives, it becomes in their kids' lives, and all of these other things that now they really care about, that really matters to them. And so I'd love for you to touch on what that process has been like for you to really start to figure out, how do you do business and yourself, and how do you prioritize yourself in that category? Because I've talked about it a lot. I've got those 5 priorities. I've got God first, myself second, my wife third, my family and friends fourth, and my business fifth. Now, I always say my priorities doesn't mean time spent, but it's, what do I prioritize? What do I put on the calendar first? What do I make a non-negotiable? And so I'd love to hear from you how you are able to make that work, and what you've seen in other similar entrepreneurial business owner people that have suffered or gone through the same type of thought processes.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think you kind of touched on the mindset of the entrepreneur, of kind of hustle culture, where we kind of have to earn our stripes. And I think in the beginning, there's an element of probably necessity to overworking. And I think that you recognize pretty quickly that there has to be a better way. That, I don't want to spend, when I was first starting my coaching business, I was doing everything myself, solopreneur. I had 121 clients to myself. Everyone was getting a phone call, and I would be, on calls till, 12 o'clock, midnight. And then I would sleep for like 4 hours. And then I would have to do all of the marketing, and I would have to do all the sales, and I would have to do all the fulfillment and all the admin work. And there was no time in the day. And, I burnt myself out really quickly, where I remember being like, you know what? I don't really want a business anymore. I'm just going to burn this to the ground. So I think sometimes there's that part of, that
everybody knows that feeling.
I think it's almost like you kind of have to go through it to recognize that there is a better path. So similar to you, I've kind of developed like 4 pillars of my life that I always want to keep in balance. And I'm going to clarify what I mean by in balance. I've got my wellness. I've got my business. I've got the financial health, that I finances that I want to keep in check. And then I have relationships, whether that's relationships with, family, friends, fiance, all of that included. So what I look at is there are seasons and phases of life. And one thing that I've really found to be beneficial is a lot of people don't know what the minimum effective dose is for each of those areas to sustain, we always want to push the throttle. We always want to step on the gas pedal, but do you actually know the minimum effective dose? And an easy example is if I can maintain my current muscle mass with 3 days a week of training, and I'm getting no additional benefits with 6 days per week of training, then it's important for me to know that my minimum effective dose may be 3 days per week. And I don't have to, go to the gym 6-7 days a week, and I can get some of that time back. Now, if I'm pursuing something like there's a certain phase of life that I want to build some muscle or compete or perform at a high level in whatever it is, maybe I have to shift things around. I look at it as kind of like a barbell where on the one end, there's the minimum effective dose. And on the other end, there's the maximum recoverable volume. And if you don't know what those things look like, it's really hard to keep those 4 pillars in balance. So it's not realistic to think that you're going to hit full throttle on all 4 pillars and be able to recover effectively and still progress. There may be a time where my business is at the minimum effective dose, and I know what things and what tasks need to get done each day to just maintain. During that time, I might be really putting a lot of emphasis into relationships where I'm pouring myself into friends and family. Then there might be a season of life where I have to operate with the minimum effective dose in my relationship so I can push the gas pedal on my business, on my, wellness, or maybe financially I'm trying to make some moves and I want to emphasize that more than anything else. The point being is I think a lot of times we know the go full speed, but we don't actually know what maintenance looks like, and we don't actually know what minimum effective dose looks like. Understanding that for each area of my life that I want to, improve and grow and continue to prioritize, I think that those concepts have been really helpful for me.
I love how you broke that down, minimum effective dose versus maximum recoverable volume, and being able to have that as a barometer that we put against the core values, the priority levels, the 4 pillars, whatever it is that you call them in your life. And that's what ultimately guides your decision-making processes and your and your focus points. What I would love, again, your opinion and your thought on and how you teach this is something that hit me here is we know how to operate at full speed, but we don't know how to operate in a maintenance mode or a minimum effective dose mode. And when a lot of people hear maintenance mode, it's like, it's not sexy. We don't want it. We don't want to lean into that. And especially with a lot of I could not disagree more with a lot of the concepts that Jocko Willink and David Goggins and a lot of these guys are pushing, where it's do hard things every single day, be hard or you're worthless. Like I really don't believe in all of that. And I think it actually paints a very negative culture and a very unhealthy mindset, a very unhealthy lifestyle in those areas. But how can you, what can you say to the people listening? How do you create a mindset shift on being okay maintaining for this period of time? And the first thing that comes to my mind is a business can't, if we're talking to entrepreneurs and executives in a lot of these spaces, you can't always be in growth mode. If you're always in growth mode, you're going to really quickly lose on the quality of your product or the quality of your service or the quality of your customer experience, because there's going to be holes that are going to be ultimately exposed. And so there's ebbs and flows to that. But and bringing that over into the lifestyle component, how do you switch somebody's mindset to being okay maintaining in some area, but making aware that you're not maintaining forever?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the most powerful tools that we have at our disposal is the power or the science of hindsight. And we have real life experiences to look at. And I always use the example with businesses when I talk to business owners. I tell them there's this paradigm that's called best month, worst month paradigm, where as a business, you are the most susceptible to your worst revenue month directly after your best. And it may not happen every time, but I can guarantee that if you look back and you look at when you hit that PR in your business and you had your best revenue month, you probably started spending more. You probably thought that this was going to be the new normal, right? We hit this, it's like somebody who deadlifts 500 pounds for the first time and that's their PR. Now all of a sudden their mind is like, well, that's our new normal. no, it's not. That's your new ceiling. We have to look at the floor and the ceiling. So a lot of times we see these businesses that have this, big ups and big downs because when they hit that high revenue month, they think, okay, this is our new standard, when in reality, it's the new ceiling. And the mindset is, I'm going to start spending and acting as if that's the new normal. So this paradigm applies in every area of life. You are the most susceptible to body fat gain after your, biggest dieting effort. You are most susceptible to a poor season if you're an athlete after your best season, mentally and physically. You're more prone to, pressure and expectation, and maybe you landed a big contract, or maybe there's the physical burnout of playing an amazing season and then the toll that it's taking on your body. Anytime we hit that PR in any area of life, it is inherent in us to be like, this is the new standard. But if we look back at the science of hindsight, you probably had a drop off. You probably didn't have the best month the next time, or, it's like telling somebody to go to the gym and trying to PR every single session. It's not likely and it's not practical. So if we look back and we realize that this is the pattern that's showing up, let's use that to make better decisions and view maintenance in a different way. So the savvy thing to do for a business owner is, you have your best revenue month. Well, let's look at how we can cut expenses. Instead of pushing the throttle even harder, instead of pushing the gas pedal even harder, let's look at how we can raise the floor. Let's look at how we can look at the holes in our system and look at where we might be bleeding money, and play a little bit of defense at this time. So I try to reframe what maintenance looks like. It's not that we're not progressing. It's that we're actually focusing on a higher floor versus a higher ceiling. So if you imagine, I don't want these big ups and downs. Let's narrow that channel of growth and allow for the next leg up. And it's almost like we're just cranking this springboard of your floor so that you then can take that next leg up in your business or your performance or your fitness, and trying to reframe it in that light, and pulling from past experience, I find to be really sticky with helping entrepreneurs in particular get over that mindset that maintenance is boring or it's not moving them forward.
I love the concept, because the way in which I'm hearing what you're talking about and kind of putting it into formed thoughts in real time here is, it all of a sudden gives us this new initiative and this new space to actually lean into what we're actually wanting to do. Because so often, if it's a season of really pushing in your business, there's going to be an expense somewhere else. It's going to cost you somewhere else, meaning time with your family, time with your kids, time maybe with the gym, something like that. Or if you're pushing in a year of like, hey, you know what? I really have to get a hold of my fitness here. I really have to get a hold of my overall health and my routines and my wellness. There's going to be a certain cost parameter to it until you get into a really great rhythm that you can figure out how these things all start to interact. And so I love this visual that you gave, kind of indirectly, but of pedal to the metal in all things literally causes your engine to overheat and explode. And if we can instead be going back and forth between pedal or gas pedal and brake in different seasons, it's going to allow us to go a lot further. And then there's going to be certain seasons where we can throw our pedal in literally cruise control, and we've mastered it. We've gotten really, really good at something. And we're just going to let this ride for a little bit while we start to do more work and have a little bit more energy and time expenditure over here.
Yeah, completely. And I think that a simple way to go about that is you look at those areas that are important to you, that are a priority, and you just give yourself a simple rating, over the last quarter, over the last year, scale of 1 to 10. How did I do in my physical health? How did I do in my business? How did I do in my relationships? And just give yourself a rating on a scale of 1 to 10. The goal is not to be a 10 across the board. But if you kind of take a concept from what Michael Jordan used to do every off season, he would assess what's the weakest part of my game. And, a lot of times he was early on in his career, he got a lot of criticism that he wasn't a great defender. So, self-assessment, I need to work on my defense. And then he became, a first team defensive player. And it's like, what pillar or what priority in my life right now is not where it needs to be. A lot of times with entrepreneurs, they might be crushing in business. Maybe they have a really good family dynamic going, but their physical health is, a 3 out of 10. Well, great. Maybe this is a season of life that we bring that up to, a 5, a 6, a 7 over time, while we're trying to maintain the 7s and 8s in the other areas. And that's kind of like that minimum effective dose, that maintenance. We're not going to lower those scores. We're going to try and keep them where they are. And try to bring that lowest score up to something that is a little bit more balanced. And, ultimately I don't believe that there's truly a 10 out of 10. I like to think that I'm always going to be a work in progress. There's always going to be something I can improve upon. But 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, that's a good place to be. If I see something slacking, if my relationships right now are just, it's a 5 out of 10, then that's going to maybe be a phase of life that I pour more into the relationship dynamic and just try to maintain the other pillars.
It's so unique what you're talking about. And I want to kind of go here next is you touched on Michael Jordan doing this in the off season, and the uniqueness of entrepreneurs and executives in talking in this space, or different business owners, is everybody knows about quarterly planning. Everybody knows about hey, every 3 months, we're going to get a really good look of where we came from to understand where we're going, and ultimately understand where we are. Because, and again, I don't know if you do this in your business, but within ours, or a lot of the people that we work with, we hear all the time, hey, October, November, this is where we're getting ready to really plan for 2023 or plan for the next year. And all those things are great. But as soon as you make that big 12-month, 3-year, 5-year plan of what that looks like, we know that 1 month in, everything goes awry. It's January 25th, it's February 2nd, and so much has happened over 6 weeks. We now have to reconfigure and identify where we're at the end of Q1 so that we can determine where we need to go in Q2 and Q3. And so I think oftentimes as business owners, we don't take the same approaches to our health and wellness. We don't take the same approaches to how we show up, because we just do it once. We're like, oh, hey, I did a DNA test. I did a blood test. I got a training plan. I did something once and it didn't work for me. But yet we didn't continue to come back and see, where were you? What changes were being made? What adjustments were happening? What was your body adapting to? What is it not adapting to? What was working well and what wasn't working well? And until we do that, it really doesn't allow us to really do anything really sustainably.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think also there's this interesting dynamic where if you were to add, let's say, for a business owner, setting revenue projections, and you're like, okay, quarterly targets, let's say you want to do $1 million this quarter. And let's just say you hit, 900K. Okay. So we missed the mark, but he'd probably assess and be like, we did some things pretty well. We were really close. Here's what we could have done better. I think there was a couple opportunities that could have put us over this $1 million mark for the quarter, but a lot to learn from, happy with the effort. You wouldn't consider it a total failure, or at least I hope not. So when you look at that in your fitness life, and you're like, my plan was to get to the gym 4 days a week. I only got to the gym 2 days a week. I'm a massive failure. Like, why even bother? But is that really a massive failure? Because it sounds to me like you made an improvement from where you started. We were just trying to get you in the habit of getting to the gym consistently, even though you didn't hit the target. There were some things you did well. There were some days that you made it to the gym. And now we have some learning opportunities here as, what happened on those other 2 days. And I think that there's always a little bit of resistance to really analyze the days that didn't go so well, because we like to brush it off as, well, I failed. Like, I just want to sweep it under the rug and move on, or I'm going to be perfect next week. And reality is you're not going to be perfect next week, because the same situation is probably going to come up. The analogy that I always use is, I don't know if you ever played an instrument growing up, but I tried to play the guitar when I was younger and I wasn't very good. And I would always get to this place in the song where I would stumble, and it was like in the middle of a song, maybe it was like a guitar solo or some difficult, riff or whatever. And I would just kind of play over it. Like, I would screw up. My teacher would be like, yeah, that was okay. And then I would play the end of the song. It's like, oh, you finished really well. So the beginning of the song, I was fine. The end of the song, I was fine. There's always that difficult part in the middle. And I remember my teacher basically explaining, like, really, really masterful guitar players, they just play that hard part in the middle over and over and over again until they get it right. And then they go back to the beginning of the song and they play from start to finish. And at the time, it didn't really connect with me because I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to keep doing it my way. And that's probably why I wasn't very good. But it's like similar when, when there's that sticking point, when there's a friction point, you're making bad choices with your nutrition. You're not getting to the gym. You're not, getting out and doing what you need to do to move your body. That's the hard part in the middle that we often are like, I'm just going to keep playing the song because there's other things. My business is going well. My family life is going well. I'm just going to ignore that hard part in the middle instead of really leaning into why didn't I get to the gym? Why didn't I make good food choices? Why didn't I move my body today? Why didn't I drink my water? Whatever it may be that you're working on. Let's keep playing that song until we get it right. And then we've got the whole thing that we can go from start to finish.
It's another great example. And I think for everybody out there listening it's another great analogy that there's not one solution. There's not one thing that's going to solve it all for you. It's figuring out what do you need? What's going to make the difference for you today? What's going to make the difference for your lifestyle today? What do you want your lifestyle to look like? And once you can get clear on that, then the solutions can start to be more tailored to you. It would make no sense if you were trying to get to the gym and make it an effective thing, but the closest gym was 25 minutes away, and you were wondering why you couldn't waste an hour of your day, because now you're literally giving time away. And so that might not be the best solution for you. And so figuring out what the best minimal effective dose for you is in creating a habit or creating a new lifestyle adjustment so that you can invest in your body, you can invest in this being, you can invest in this vessel that ultimately your dream, your mission, your vision is leaning on and requiring to be great so that you can yield great results. I talk about it all the time as we're built in the image of God, and God was not mediocre. There was nothing mediocre about that. And so that is how we were set up as well. That is the standard in which we're yet to operate. That is the standard in which we need to show up with. And if we were built for excellence, if we were built for greatness, if we were built to be abundant, then let's make sure that the routines, the practices, the disciplines that we surround ourselves with also reflect that.
Yeah, it's really well said. One exercise that I have clients do is, you probably heard it called like the perfect day journal or whatever. There's different names for it, but you're basically outlining in a perfect scenario, ideal world, what does the future version of me that I want to become, what does that person's day look like, and outline it from start to finish, and how much time, like what are the habits that they have? How much time are they working on their business? How much time are they spending with their kids and their family? And it really starts to help you with your priorities and understanding what true success looks like for you. And a thing that oftentimes stands out is there's usually a big disconnect. One of my clients who is a business owner started to identify there's a lot of family time in the perfect day, but there's not a family time in present day. And it's like, there's a big gap right now. It's like, holy shit, there's this big disconnect of what I value and what I want more than anything in the world. But what I'm actually doing is taking time away from my family with a lot of the decisions that I'm making. How can we start to move closer to that future version of yourself that you want to become and act in accordance with how that person acts? And it's an awareness tool that really can help with priorities. And to your point, everybody's different. And that's why I think it's a really valuable exercise, because what works for me might not work for somebody else. And it's really understanding what matters most to you. And then starting to just slowly over time, bridge that gap.
100%. You're exactly right. Mike, where can people find more of your content? Where can they engage with you more? Where can they really kind of lean in and get more of everything that you've put out, from your books to your podcast to those types of things?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it. The best place to connect with me on social media is Instagram. My handle is @coach_Mike_Milner. You can grab my book on Amazon. It's called The Personality Diet. Just basically a kind of structure for helping to understand the individual nature of nutrition. And then the podcast is called Mind Over Macros, and that's available on any podcast platform. And everyone can go check out the interview that I did with you on the show.
I love it. I love it. And we'll also repurpose it here so you guys can catch up on that. We had a great conversation the other day. Mike, if you were to summarize the definition of ownership in a sentence or a phrase, what would your definition of ownership be?
Taking responsibility for your future self.
I love it. As you guys leave here, I really want you to kind of hear what we've talked about today and really take it to heart, because when we get clear on what our values are, that's ultimately what can start to determine when we want to scale, when we want to grow, when we want to develop, and when it's time to maintain, when it's time to lean into that minimum effective dose space. There's going to be definitely areas that we need to push on. We need to lean on the gas pedal, where we're going to talk about that maximal recoverable volume that we're going to be able to lean into. That's where we start to see growth, development, scale. But there's going to be seasons of life where that minimum effective dose has to be acceptable, has to be something that we truly love and lean into, because otherwise there's no way to build that holistic life that we're looking for, that synergistic effect that is going to happen. And when you truly take responsibility for your future self, when you take ownership over that, you can become very health centric, meaning that you realize that your body, your vessel, the thing that you are here stewarding is ultimately going to be the difference between excelling and continuing to grow your mission, vision, and purpose, or it's going to be the exact thing that holds you back from realizing your true potential. And as we all know, we've been put here for a reason. We've been put here for a reason, and to impact and have a large impact in this world. So we know success is different. So own your different. And we'll see you guys next week.